we were still able to have the meeting today. We like to start these meetings by just refreshing everybody's memory about the key goals of this particular committee based on the motion that was struck to form this committee. So we have we are set to establish clear definitions and measures of poverty, as well as a living wage for Prince Edward Island, to make recommendations on those two pieces. As well, we will be making a recommendation on a fully costed basic income guarantee pilot for Prince Edward Island. So those are the pieces that we have been working on. And today we have with us the Department of Social Development and Housing. We have representatives from that department. David Keedwell, who is the Deputy Minister of Social Development and Housing. Karen McCaffrey, Director of Social Programs, and Pat MacDonald, Manager of Social Supports. So what we usually do is we have an opportunity for our guests to share a presentation, and then we open the floor for questions. So hopefully that same format will work for everyone. I'll just quickly review our members of the committee. We have Gordon McNeely, Sunny Gallant, Hannah Bell, Honorable Ernie Hudson, Natalie Jameson, and myself, Trish Altas. All right, so we do need to just officially adopt the agenda. So we've circulated the agenda. Would anybody like to move to adopt? All right, thank you. Minister Hudson, all in favor of the agenda? Yes, okay, sounds good. All right, and with that, we will hand the floor over to our presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. David Keedwell, Social Development Housing. Good morning, everyone. I have Karen McCaffrey and Pat MacDonald here, as the Chair had mentioned. We appreciate being here to discuss the social assistance program. It's a big integral part of our department and obviously affects a lot of Islanders. We have a presentation prepared today. Karen and Pat will be giving it. Hopefully it'll answer the three questions that were posed to us about the program. After that presentation, if there's any questions, we'd be pleased to address them. You want to go ahead?
Great, thank you, David. So good morning, everybody. We'll go through our presentation. So as requested, our presentation will provide you information related to the mandate, an overview of the social assistance program, as well as recent changes, the conditions of social assistance program, as well as issues faced by frontline staff who support our clients. So we're first going to take a look at the program itself. So the program receives legislative authority through the Social Assistance Act and regulations. The goal of the program is to assist Islanders to meet their basic needs based on eligibility requirements. So those items of basic need are outlined in the regulations, and they include things such as food, shelter, utilities, clothing, household items, local transportation, communication, and medication. As well, we provide supports for special needs based on eligibility. So some of those items would be dental services, glasses, or funerals. So for people to enter the program, people can apply through our toll-free centralized screening number that you can see on the screen. As well, we have 5 offices across the province, so people could apply in person at any of our offices. So an intake screener answers those calls and asks questions to sort of do a predetermination of eligibility. So they determine things such as age, whether people are legally entitled to be in Canada, looking at family size and composition, and any custody arrangements to just understand a little bit more about the client and their family situation, as well as they gather some generic information on a client's income, assets, and expenses. And based on this screening call, there's a predetermined eligibility. So after that, the clients will meet with a social supports coordinator to make a formal application for the program. And so the screener lets them know in advance some of the information to bring with them to that meeting so that they can move through the application. Some of that information includes a verification of expenses that the client has, so things like a mortgage or rent receipt, utility bills, etc. Also, evidence confirmation of residency, so a SIN number or any immigration documents. And also they look for a verification of calculable income. So those are things that are calculated as part of their income for their budget deficit. So things like a pay stub or employment insurance, workers' compensation information, veterans pension, or private insurance. Some of the items that aren't included in the calculation of income are child support, a child tax benefit, or HST or GST rebates. So from that information, it's used to determine the level of social assistance an individual would receive based on their budget deficit. So the difference between their expenses that they have and the income that they have. So once an individual moves through the application process, they would meet with their social supports coordinator to develop a case plan. And this is a customized case plan that's established to meet the client's needs. So it would include things like their benefits that they receive. And also there's a pre-condensed employability assessment done at this stage as well. And it sets up whether individuals need skills development and that type of thing. And if clients are able to be employed, they are referred to an employment connector. So those are positions we have within the department, and they do a full employability assessment with the client. And that would determine whether, again, whether someone needs to maybe have some life skills training or some skills development or move into an employment program. So meetings with the social support coordinators are determined by this case plan. Some people may need more or less meetings, and as well, at a minimum, there's an annual review with the client to determine a new service agreement. So this looks at the types of clients that we have in social assistance. So I spoke a bit about the clients that are determined to be able to be employed. As well, we do have clients who are temporary or permanently exempt from employment. So that information would typically come from a doctor's note, a physician's note. We do support clients as well who are residing in a community care facility and exempt from employment. As well, we do one-time only specialist social assistance requests for special needs items. So that might be medical transportation that they need to go to a province, or a certain type of medical equipment, or maybe a funeral. So there have been a number of enhancements to the program over the last couple of years, starting in 2018. The most recent one was a significant increase December and January of this past year, January 2020, where rates increased by $109 for adults, $64 for each additional adult in the household, and $34 for children in the household. So that's a substantial increase. As well, in January, about a year ago, 2019, food rates were increased by 10%, and prior to that there was a 5-year plan to move food rates forward, and shelter rates in 2018 increased as well by 6% and 3%. Liquid asset exemptions have increased as well. So that's more money that people can have, cash in the bank that's not applied towards their budget deficit. So for an example, a single person can have $2,500 in liquid assets. That's not counted as part of that. Or if for a couple,
Single per 35 for single person dependent.
yes. Okay, and as well, there's higher income exemptions that have been implemented over the last couple of years. So a person can work and make $250 before it's deducted from their budget deficit, and as well 30% of the remainder of the money that they are earning. And there's been a number of employment-based supports that have occurred, and I'm going to touch more on those in the next slide. So supports to help people transition to employment. There has been an employment supports benefit implemented. That's $750 that's available to a client to help purchase items to support them going back to work. So things like clothing or a driver's license or anything that they need that's related to their employment. As well, medical, dental and optical benefits have been extended for 24 months after somebody leaves social assistance for the workforce. In the past, it was quite a drop-off when someone was employed, their benefits stopped right away. So this helps people transition for 24 months. There's been a lot of work on employment readiness and skills development to prepare people for the workforce, coaching on looking for jobs, life skills development, and as well assistance to overcome other barriers to employment. So things like transportation to get to your job and childcare. There's been a number of enhancements to this childcare subsidy program over the last couple of years as well. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Pat now to talk about the conditions.
Thanks, Karen. Good morning, everyone. So we're going to talk a bit about the conditions of the social assistance program and some of the requirements as far as eligibility and how some of the process works. So under the conditions and requirements, we'll go to the next slide, thanks. So part of the condition requirement for the process of determining eligibility for a client is to provide verification of income and assets and expenses, and Karen referred to those earlier in one of the slides. Clients are asked to attend regular meetings with their social support coordinator to review the case plan, Staff, we have staff that are trained, and we have staff that are involved in ongoing training now with respect to motivational interviewing and collaborative case management. And we're working with the university, which is where the training is being provided right now for the collaborative case management. And that's it's an intensive training process that is very beneficial in supporting our staff and understanding what it means to provide that integral support for our clients. The intake and program elements are more focused on employment, as I think Karen has also referenced as well. The employment piece is certainly a focus, if it is appropriate, of course. If we have a client who is obviously in a community care facility, for example, our case plan with them isn't going to be expected to be focused on targeting an employment outcome. So some of the payment options that are available for our clients, certainly we respect that everyone has the right to determine how their funds are allocated. And certainly we respect the fact that each of our clients has the right to determine for themselves how they want those funds distributed. So we very much encourage that clients pay their own bills when and where possible. Social assistance can make direct payments as a support option for sure. Approximately 70% of our clients who receive funding are on an EFT, electronic fund transfer. So there may be a request, however, by a client or family or support system or support person to consider another option as far as making a payment direct on behalf of an eligible client. We could also offer through the coordinator, based on the client's history, whether there is a financial concern, and maybe there's been a history of some responsibility concerns with respect to the client utilizing or allocating those funds as they're intended to be. So we may, in those situations, based on a mutually agreed upon case plan, determine if the client's in agreement to say, we're going to make this payment on your behalf and work with you to get you to the point that you're comfortable making that payment on your own in the near future. It may be a requirement for some of the landlords and utilities. In all fairness, we do get requests from landlords and utilities to say, yes, we will provide that. However, we would request that the payment be made directly to us. So part of what we were asked to present today, folks, was with regards to frontline staff insights. And we went through a process of interviewing, engaging with some of our coordinators from offices across the province, and a number of questions were asked with respect to barriers do you have, what barriers do you think clients are presenting, and the conditions to maintain eligibility, are they problematic, are they supportive? It's important to us that we screen and we intake and we process and develop case plans for clients that is as soft a touch as possible, that it's not seen or felt that it's very impactful, because it is very much a personal process. So we have professional development, as I've mentioned, around collaborative case management and motivational interviewing, that's really developing the skills for our coordinators to be able to interact with their clients, certainly through that lens of support and trying to establish a mutually agreed upon plan that's going to have the best possible outcome for the client. The purpose, of course, is to improve the client interaction, and we're very vigilant and constant in discussing how we can improve our client interactions. We work with and support clients with decision-making and skill development. Our client caseload complexity mix. The caseloads vary by complexity, and the coordinators certainly may have more interaction with some clients than with others. And again, I'll use the example of a client who may be in a community care facility, whereby their needs are fairly static because the cost of care, the commercial room board rate, is a fixed amount, it's a contracted amount. Their needs aren't necessarily fluctuating in that respect. So the interaction with those folks certainly would be less involved, less intense than it would be with an individual who we're considering as employable. So we have an opportunity now to meet with individuals at the newly opened Community Outreach Center here in Charlottetown as well. So our focus, as Karen has mentioned, is on employment outcomes for those whereby it certainly is an appropriate outcome. So we support clients with connections to government and NGO services, Employment Development Agency, Career Bridges, Skills PEI, Tourism Association, and certainly those that have EI or labor market attachment, and utilizing that attachment to be able to convert the employment insurance benefit over to a stipend or a training opportunity to help move them along that employment continuum. So client barriers too, and certainly what it is around the barriers. This is, It's around certainly consideration for barriers to employment, and life skills and budgeting can be a barrier for any client, whether there's an employment potential outcome or not. But certainly life skills we see as a very common concern for our clients presenting as far as their routine, maybe not having a recent history of having a routine of being able to go attend appointments, attend meetings on time, and present appropriately, and so on. So that is an area that that we work very closely with certainly some of our partners at Venture Group, East Prince Youth Development Center, and they do wonderful work with our clients in supporting them in that life skills development for sure. Rural transportation options. There is a challenge. I think that we would suggest that in some cases it is a challenge for folks, that our clients that are in the rural areas, to get access to regular transportation, and it is about fitting needs and schedules, and that certainly becomes more of a challenge. Employment consideration for employment options. When we look at that, we're in PEI, so we know that we have somewhat of a seasonal cycle. We certainly know that the education levels for some of our clients may impact on potential employment outcome. Work preparation and skills, as I mentioned, through life skills development and such. We have clients that may not have any work history, or they have a sporadic work history, or they've not had a positive interaction in any work history they may have had. So employment insurance eligibility is also an opportunity for us to work with those individuals around accessing programs and funding that's available through, obviously, federally funded programs. And general knowledge of our programs and services available. We've gone through some significant changes over the last few years, so it's important to us that we're communicating with the communities and the public and our clients about what programs we have available and what services we have available, particularly in the means and the mode that our clients prefer to receive that information. So that's a general overview, and certainly thank you for the opportunity to present here today. And we're willing to certainly field some questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think what we'll do, I expect we have a lot of questions from around the committee here, so I'm going to try to limit to 3 questions per person and then move to the next person, then come back, just out of fairness. So we'll start with Ernie Hudson.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, I'd like to recognize Roxanne Carter-Thompson from the Adventure Group, who is in the gallery today. It's great to see you here again, Roxanne. Just a couple of comments that I would have, Chair. Certainly, first of all, I want to thank the members from my department who have presented here today. One of the things that I've said, right across the board with our department is the great partners that we have in delivering programs. Pat had alluded to that in part of his presentation. But to recognize that, but as Minister, I also want to recognize the great work that the department does do on a day-to-day basis for vulnerable islanders, and I certainly appreciate that, and I'm sure that all islanders do too. That it's extremely important work that is done with care, with compassion. So again, thank you for that. I guess just to wrap up, I'm looking forward to the discussion, to the questions that will be forthcoming today. And again, thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
No question at this time. No. All right, Hannibal.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for being here today. Perhaps, Chair, if I'll start with just a couple of questions to clarify some of the point, or to ask further information, some of the points from your presentation. How frequently under the current system do clients meet with caseworkers? You mentioned they meet. What does frequent meetings look like?
Well, again, I think it's contingent on what the development and the mutual agreement is within the case plan and what the expected case plan outcomes may be depending on the client situation. We have a requirement to meet with clients at least once a year. But as far as the cadence and frequency of those meetings, it can certainly vary based on any individual case plan.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Hannibal.
With the new accessibility support program, which is effectively a separate program, how many clients have been moved effectively from social assistance to accessibility support, or how is that being kind of managed and delivered under the overall umbrella of social assistance?
So we've transitioned approximately 650, 700 clients over to accessibility assured income through social assistance. And when I say that, I guess I probably should provide some parameters and understanding what that means. The assured income component of accessibility is really in essence the social assistance component. So just to be clear, and then of course the assured income is also attached to that disability specific need that client may have.
Thank you. And the reason for asking about that is because, you know, you've talked a lot about the employment supports that are available, and there's a lot of obviously input, but we've heard, you know, pretty clearly from stakeholders in the community that the majority of the people on social assistance are not actually employable. And so the numbers I've been told consistently from stakeholders is about 65%. Okay. So I'm just wondering if that number still holds true, because effectively you're saying accessibility support is still under that social assistance umbrella. What is the percentage of people who are actually considered in that employable category under social assistance?
And I will speak specifically to social assistance. So I think at this point, and going back to what Karen presented, was that you know, we've gone through and continue to go through a number of changes and modernization. So part of that change involves how we assess employability. So we do have basically a 3-category approach to that. So it's sort of a category A, B, C, and a category A client would be considered someone who has few barriers to employment, has a reasonable level of education, may have a reasonable work history, and may not have any sort of particular direct issues or impacts about going to employment other than perhaps transportation or childcare or things like that, or maybe some training and so on. Category B individual would be someone who may requires a bit more intervention. They may have a few more barriers to be considered. Their education level may be of an impact and so on. And then of course we have category C, or would be the clients that we would be considering that are not employable. So we're going through that process now to assess, and part of the role of what the employment connectors, and going back to what Karen's presentation was, that initial screening, the initial intake with the coordinator, so a social support coordinator, they're doing a bit of a dive into that employability for that particular client, so we can make sure that they're on the correct path. Mm-hmm. If we see that there's a potential employability outcome there, then they get referred to the employment connector. The employment connector does a much more intensive, comprehensive employability assessment, and then that assessment we would expect will categorize that client so that we can appropriately establish a case plan to support them going forward.
I just have a follow-up question to this. So I'm wondering, you designating people into sort of category A, B, and C in order to determine what sort of supports might best fit, in terms of their employment needs and supports. Are there any consequences that are tied to those sorts of categorizations? So in terms of the plans that you develop for them, if let's say a category A person, doesn't end up finding employment or isn't actively seeking employment for whatever reason, are there any consequences tied to those designations?
Well, we develop the plans with the client. Okay. We don't develop it for the client. We develop it's a mutually agreed upon plan, and so we recognize that our clients, many of our clients, present with some barriers and some sort of concerns about how they're able to move forward. And part of what we do around with the training through motivational interview and collaborative case management, it's about identifying those barriers and helping the client understand when they're get into that situation of complacency and not seeing their situation moving forward. So it's important that the client is in the same level as the coordinator about what they want for themselves going forward. So I wouldn't expect that we're looking at it in any sort of consequential way. It's not a punitive approach at all. I think what we do is apply a significant level of flexibility and support, because the reality is if you're a category B client, you could be a period of time away from potentially being employable or actually securing a job. So it's important that we focus on where that client is at that given point in time.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate that clarification. So it's about making sure that people are getting the right supports at the right time, not any sort of risk of losing support if they're not meeting those goals.
No.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Yes.
Can I just follow up on the last one? I had asked whether you could provide a percentage of clients who are considered employable? Are you not able to do that right now, or do you not have that kind of number?
No, actually, because we are in the process of doing that, since we've done the transformation and the transition of folks to the accessibility support program, we now know what our core social assistance caseload is. So now that gives us a great opportunity to start looking at, we have a sense, but I don't want to offer percentages that I'm really at this point in time I would suggest are accurate. We want to make sure that we have accurate information as to who we have and sort of where they are on the employability continuum.
Thank you, Chair.
Gordon Keeley.
Thanks a lot. These are great increases. My question would be around who did the department consult with? What was the process to make that change at that particular time? And basically, who did you consult with to make these decisions?
So we do understand still, and we do regular processes to review rates internally, and we do still understand there's food insecurity is a concern. And when we look at national guidelines related to food, Health Canada has guidelines around a national nutritious food basket. So the food rate increase did bring our rates more in line with what they're recommending in terms of costing for individuals by age and gender. So that was a consideration.
Gord?
And in the press release on December 23rd, I know that my colleague from Charlottetown, Belvedere, was in that press release. What was the consultation piece around the Green Party consulting with you guys to come to these decisions?
I wasn't part of that directly.
You may want to defer that to the minister
Yes.
himself, who was maybe involved in the consultations, but ourselves, we're not involved.
Okay, I'll ask the same question to the minister.
Minister Hudson, would you like to respond to that?
Oh, I think you look across the board, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about food rates, whether we're talking about assured income, or we're talking about legislative changes, any changes. This government has worked in collaboration, in discussion with the official opposition, and certainly have had discussions with the third party as well. So, the details of any meeting, any discussion that I may have with any individual MLA, such as yourself, as the honourable member, that is certainly, in my opinion, it's between myself or the other ones that may be in the room at that point in time. But I think at the end of the day, we have to look, we're all here for, ultimately for the same reason. We want to review programs on an ongoing basis, rates of assistance, and at the end of the day, after feedback that we may have from any individual MLA, any individual member from the public, that would be taken into consideration as we move forward and make changes and adjustments.
So in terms of consultation, while we're on this topic, we've invited you here today as a first step to hear what your thoughts are on the goals of this committee. I'm wondering, if moving forward, what you would recommend as we go through the steps of modeling out different possibilities around a basic income and possibly putting recommendations forward to the legislature. What would you like to see ideally in terms of consultation with your department?
Consultations in regards to basic income guarantee, or consultations in regard to?
Yes, into the work of this committee specifically. So this committee will be putting forward recommendations around a fully costed basic income. So the question of, continuing forward, what type of consultation would you see ideally we should be making with the department as we develop those recommendations? And how would you like to see that take place?
Chair, I think at any time our department's open to meet with anybody at any time to discuss, and we have been open in the past, and we'd be more than open to have consultations with anybody. And we have that as a department today, and I wouldn't see any problem going forward. And again, you have a resident expert here. Pat, how long have you been in the
Doing this, 27 years.
27 years. So he has a very good depth of knowledge, and I think it could come in, it could work both ways.
Thank you. Gord?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I was not consulted. I found out about this in a press release on December 23rd, so I have some questions about the releasing such important information for Islanders, making such a big change at that particular time. So, my question is, with this big change for the department, because I'm going to ask you guys, how are you going to measure the effectiveness of the change with such a large proportion, a good proportion of money into the system? How are you going to measure the difference and how that's going to relate to your clients?
Well, I think we can look at it in a couple ways. Certainly, we monitor, caseloads and support that we provide to people. I think, supporting people with more, food security and different supports, like that helps them to develop their life. So certainly whether people, move back to employment. So as Pat mentioned, our next focus is really going to be on continuing to develop employment skills, job training. So is there, kind of an impact on that front as well? I think it's kind of probably multi-pronged.
Sunny.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for coming in and your presentation, and certainly very informative. I have a few questions. Just kind of wondering, some of the numbers that you've mentioned, where you get those numbers, like the $250, is that weekly or monthly that they're allowed to make?
Monthly.
Monthly?
Yeah.
And then you talked about $2,500 in cash in the bank. Where do we get those figures, and what's the reasoning for that? Why isn't it $4,500 or why isn't it $1,500? Where do those figures come from? Is it with consultation with people, or?
Well, certainly at the time when and I was only a part of the discussions, and not complete part of the discussions around looking at, where the asset levels and exemptions and so on should go. But to be honest, I think at the end of the day, it is very much sort of often a comparable to other jurisdictions, and primarily where we look at, our sister provinces, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, where are they? And I think if you look at PEI through that lens with respect to those ancillary supports around exemptions and assets, we do very well nationally, and we do extremely well within our maritime setting. So it is sort of trying to find that balance of making sure that folks, to the best of our ability, have enough to sort of put aside to be able to kind of have there, and then to be able to look at as public funds, what do we distribute, what's an appropriate amount to sort of distribute out. So those amounts hadn't changed at that point in time for a number of years. So it certainly warranted a review and an increase, I would suggest. So I can't speak to exactly, what all the sources were to which they sought out that information, but certainly jurisdictional scans and speaking with their counterparts is certainly a large part of that.
Okay.
Hannah had an interjection here.
I can provide an intervention because I can tell you exactly what happened, which was, and I'm surprised that my colleague doesn't recall it, because at the time they were in government, but it was 2018, at the time income clawback, the amount that you were able to earn on social assistance was $50 a month. And the amount that you were able to retain was, I think, $150 or $250. It was very low, and it hadn't been changed for a number of years.
That was the exemption amount.
Yeah, the exemption amounts, and the third party at that time put forward a very strong case that it needed to be increased because it was preventing people from being able to sort of have dignity in terms of the amount they could earn. And the government at that time, with Minister Mundy, did eventually announce that increase, and it was based on exactly as you said, in terms of what were the standards in across Canada, but specifically in Atlantic Canada. And we met or exceeded the standards that were being held in other provinces. So it was a really significant change, and it was implemented by the previous government at the time. As I said, my colleague was in the House on that sort of public pressure and discussion. So yeah, it did make a huge difference for clients, but it was definitely done with input from stakeholders across the community. Thank you, Chair, for the input.
Sunny.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank the member next to me for the history update. I mean, I know I was aware. I was just asking a question of where we get to these amounts. So thank you. And I do have a few other questions, but I have two more, I guess, before you move on. where are we going with this? Like, and I appreciate, and we do as a party on our side, that the rates need to be increased. But where are we going now? Is there going to be an annual review going forward, or is this something that'll just stay until it's brought to the department's attention, we need another increase? Like, what's your plan going forward?
So we do review rates annually. They may not increase annually, you know, based on the needs across our whole department and of course across government. And as Pat mentioned, our plans really are to of the next year continue on some of our poverty reduction work around employment and continuing to develop skills and work with our clients and all of our community partners as well. So that's our focus for the next year, and continuing as well to look at rates, like I mentioned.
Okay. My next question is kind of twofold. I know there's single people on assistance, and there's people with families, and people trying to transition into the workforce. Can you give us a few numbers, like how many single men is there, how many single ladies, how many, like where are people going as far as placement into the workforce? How's it all working out?
So we have about 3,400 caseloads. So that's broken into, there's approximately 2,400 single individuals. I don't have the male-female breakdown for you, but we could get that.
Okay.
About 800 families, so those would vary, you know, there could be 3 people, 5 people in family, and about 140 couples with no dependents. So that kind of makes up our 3,400 caseloads.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as people integrating back into the workforce?
Sorry, go ahead. You can ask your
Integrating
question.
back into the workforce. So that's, as Pat mentioned, some of the data that we're looking at collecting now so that we understand, and through the employment assessments that are occurring, kind of getting a sense of the ABC category and working with people and families to collect that data, and that will help drive, you know, some of our programming.
Okay, I'll come back after. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you.
I'm just to respond to the gender disseminations, approximately 1,900 female, 1,450 or so male.
For single individuals.
Okay, thank you.
Natalie.
Chair, and thank you all for coming in today to present to us. I really appreciate it. I just want to take the opportunity to acknowledge that it's Wear Purple Day, so it's great to see so many in purple and in their ribbons as we remember victims of violence and their families. So on that topic, I was just curious if you could provide some insight or some guidance in terms of what emergency funding is available for individuals who are fleeing other provinces from a violent situation coming to Prince Edward Island or fleeing violence on the island.
We have a dedicated family violence protocol policy within our program, and our staff are specifically, trained in how to apply that particular policy and understanding the sensitivities of those situations. So when we're privy to the fact that we're being presented with a situation that may be of family violence nature, staff are very adept and certainly very aware and very sensitive and appreciative of what steps and what supports they are able to provide. We don't, in those situations, we don't necessarily look at, what's the cap amount on, like we're going to look at what is the situation, what is it that this individual requires, whether there's children involved or no children involved. It's important that we understand the dynamic, move quickly, support them in the process, and help them understand what resources are available to them as well. It's truly a very difficult, trying time for the individual, and so our staff are extremely sensitive to that. So that we have a dedicated policy on that. So that's an important area for us.
And this might be a good time just to note that today at noon there is a walk in silence for victims of family violence that will be taking place. So we will, have the goal of ending, in time for people to participate in that. However, we'll reassess when we get closer to the time and see what the committee feels at that point. I myself had the pleasure of being able to participate in the walk yesterday in Summerside, and they had over 70 people attend that
that's
event.
great.
So,
Excellent.
Natalie.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. So is there a set policy for individuals who land on PEI after fleeing violence in other provinces?
Same policy would apply.
Same policy would apply?
Same policy would apply.
Okay. Okay, very good.
Natalie, one more question?
Sure, thanks, Chair. So one of the barriers, obviously, to employment is childcare, with wait lists ranging from months to years. So obviously, it's challenging when you're seeking employment to line up that timing, as I know personally. How are your employment connectors helping to support clients with finding appropriate childcare as they're seeking employment?
Well, we have dedicated childcare subsidy coordinators.
Okay.
So those folks if we have a situation where a client requires childcare for whatever, and it may not necessarily be for employment either. So we direct them to, or they're initially contacting us for that type of request. So we have dedicated staff, specific staff that deal with childcare subsidy applications only.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Hannah?
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to the kind of the core things that we're working on in this committee, one of the first things that we're looking at is the measurement of poverty, and we've had a pretty clear consensus from the whole range of stakeholders that the market basket measure, which has been adopted as a national standard, is the standard that we're looking at probably making a recommendation on, I hope, here. The current market basket measure for a single person for example, in Charlottetown, it's a bit different between Charlottetown and PEI, is around $19,000 right now. By our calculations, the current amount that's allocated on a monthly basis to a single person on social assistance is about $1,000, which is half of the market basket measure recommendation.
Sorry, so how much, sorry?
1,000. So that's made up of the basic needs, which is food, clothing, household and personal, plus the maximum shelter allowance. Now, again, the numbers move around a lot, but we kind of use sort of averages, and for a single person without the extra, that's about what they get a month. That's half of what they would need based on the market basket measure. So can you speak about what the impact would be, or is there a plan for what happens if we shift how we measure poverty and what we set that poverty measure at on your department? Because that would be perhaps the first thing that could happen ahead of us talking about basic income or bringing something in, is if that recommendation is made, what can your department do to begin to adjust and look at that really big gap between what people get and what the measure says they should be getting?
So I think our numbers are perhaps a little bit higher. There was a recent report, the Welfare in Canada report through Maytree, and we do, certainly there is a gap. Certainly there is a number of people living in poverty. When we look at how we do compare for a two-parent family with 2 kids, we're the highest in the country for social assistance. And the recent increase just before Christmas, this puts us a little bit higher across categories as well, which wasn't factored into that report either. I think, like I mentioned, continually looking at ways to support people either through employment or continuing to assess rates, and we don't use the market basket measure officially as our measure, because I know that's the work of this committee to recommend on that. It certainly we take into consideration a lot of factors when we're looking at that. So I think that would be, if that was the direction provided, we would go back and evaluate, kind of where we want to take the program based on that.
Chair? Yeah. And I do appreciate that the gap is less for a couple with 2 children. I know even before the announcement, the more recent pieces, it was in that kind of 85, but it was a lot closer. I'm talking about single people who are your largest demographic in social assistance, and for them it's at around 50%. So where your largest component, unless there's a very big different number in what people are getting, it's about $1,000 a month. So I'd be happy to hear that it's more than that, but there's still a really big gap for the people who are single, who are your biggest demographic. And I'll be really blunt. I appreciate that you provide things like life skills and budgeting, but I have no idea how you teach somebody to budget with $1,000 a month to live in PEI. I really don't know how people do it, because we hear from them every day. There's a really big gap there, and there is a big potential gap that the department is going to have to address sooner rather than later. Obviously the food rate increase was a huge piece in that, just to get money in people's pocket right away. But again, it's still a Band-Aid. So my question is, again, I think it comes back to what the chair said in terms of consultation. sooner rather than later, do you see that we need to sit down and talk about the plan, to begin to plan for a substantive change in how you determine what people actually need to live on while they are in this situation?
And I think, as David mentioned, we're happy to do that anytime, and certainly work together with this committee. Just to clarify, and I would agree, single individuals still are not as close to market basket measure as some of our families. Our numbers, and if including what they receive through social assistance plus the federal benefits, which is how the Maitri report looks at calculating it, it's a little over 13,000, so it's about 66% of the MBM currently. So it's a little higher than 50, and I know not 100 certainly. And we do, again, comparatively, we have the second highest rate in the country for single individuals. Still a gap, but we do often, compare to our jurisdictions, and the highest in the Maritimes it is as well. Not to say there's not more work to be done, but just to
But I would reiterate that
Thank
you. I would reiterate that $13,000 a year is $1,000 a month. Right? It's for rent, for food, for cleaning supplies, for medication, for transport, for everything. I don't know anybody in this room that could make it a month with $1,000.
Well, medication, if you qualify for assistance, you automatically are eligible to access the pharmacare system. So there's no cost to the individual for the medications. Just to clarify.
And I appreciate that,
Yeah.
but not all medications that people need are covered under
I
pharmacare.
understand, but I just wanted to make sure
Right.
that,
No.
Sunny.
Just back on that, is also dental covered?
Correct. We have a dental coverage policy that's attached to the social assistance program, yes.
And those special expenses are in addition to the amount that we're talking about.
Okay.
Sunny?
So did I hear you correctly? We're the second highest in Canada for single people on income support?
No.
That's according to the national report put out. It's online.
Second highest in the country.
Yeah, and that's before our rate increase. So we may be a little higher than that.
And we're the highest in the Maritimes.
Yes.
Okay.
Perhaps, you said the report is online, would it be possible just to send that to the committee, just so that we can have that?
Oh, absolutely.
review it ourselves?
Yeah, no, we can do that.
Great, thank you very much. Sunny.
So I can certainly see where there's a concern for single people, like where there's 66% and a couple with no children at 68. And the gap is closing for the others with family, which is great. But I can see the concern there. You said you did a jurisdictional scan, and as I'd indicated before, we fully appreciate everything you do and these increases. The thought of letting people pay their own bills, is that what's happening across the country, or is that something we thought we'd do here as a pilot? Or in the past, the department would have looked after all that, right? You would have looked after the rent? No, you didn't?
No, I think, and I can't speak with it to every jurisdiction, to be quite honest, but I believe that every other jurisdiction, we all sort of follow the same formula with respect to determining that sort of dissemination of funds, appreciating that other jurisdictions are significantly larger. So administratively, the process is far different, as far as we're one of the few jurisdictions left who actually do home visits with clients. No one else really does that anymore. So that's a part of, what we hold, near and dear to us as islanders. We want that interaction with the people that are providing us with the support. So we've not changed that. And so the reasons why we would set up funds to be issued on behalf of a client, it could be, as I mentioned, the reasons earlier, maybe the landlord's requiring it, maybe the utility's requiring it, maybe the client is asking us, or a support person within that client's support circle is asking for that. So those would be the time. But majority of situations, our clients receive their funds that they are entitled to receive, and they have clear determination in how they disseminate those funds.
Sunny, did you want one more?
Yes, please. And the next one's more of a comment. Like, it's wonderful to see the transition to employment where there is assistance for somebody to get some clothing, some safety boots, what have you, if they're not provided. So there is some wonderful things that are happening, and thank you very much.
I just have a couple of follow-up follow-up questions based on Sunny's questions, if that's all right. So you just mentioned that we are one of the few jurisdictions that still engage in home visits. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what that looks like a little bit more. Is that something when a client requests a home visit rather than coming in for whatever reason, if they have accessibility issues or challenges? Or is it something that you actively go and seek, go out to their home? Who chooses that? How does that happen?
Can be both, can be mutually agreed upon. A significant number of our accessibility support clients, and we're not here to present on accessibility today, but just as an example, for those accessibility reasons, it certainly makes more sense to go to their home, and they may be far more comfortable because it is their home. We have clients that, on the social assistance side, who request a home visit. We have no problem accommodating that. And certainly we have coordinators that will offer that. Maybe it's a situation that transportation is not readily available for the client to be able to come in and meet with us. Or we can meet at a mutually agreed upon site, neutral site as well, if that works for the client. We have staff that are going, are scheduled, and are participating in the support circle with the Community Outreach Center. So it's not you come to our office, we provide you service, you leave. We do that, but we also have opportunity to consider various ways in being able to meet and support that client.
Yeah. No, that's definitely great to hear, and I think, we really do need to make sure that we are meeting people where they are at and where they're most comfortable.
Absolutely.
So you said it can happen both ways, though. So was there ever a situation where you are, we require someone to engage in a home visit? I mean, it might work the other way where someone might not be comfortable having you come into their home.
It's certainly encouraged. We're not going to, force ourselves upon it. If a client is not comfortable in having that engaged, then we'll have a conversation about that. And I think really what it is about where is it that you would like to meet with us? What is comfortable for you? Having that ability to meet with individuals within their own environment, it really gives you more of a holistic picture as to the situation and the conditions within which the client may be living, which truly could benefit the client. If we see that they're in a situation that we weren't privy to before, that we may be able to support and assist on in helping move them away for that, if we feel that this is not an appropriate place for this person to be, then we can help support them in engaging in that conversation by being there and seeing those conditions. So it doesn't happen often, but it is a reality, is that you're going to get a far better picture of someone's situation by being within their environment, if they are willing to support you being there, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for that clarification. I think it is that last piece, if they're willing to support you being there, because it is someone's, private home, and if they are.
And the safety for our staff is of the utmost importance as well, for sure.
Thank you. Gord.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a couple of questions, because I think that we're all trying to get to eradicating poverty, taking care of people, and we get stuck between taking care of and empowering your clients. And I'm glad to see that the department is doing both. Can you just talk a little bit about, I know, what it's like for a department to see clients go to places like the Adventure Group, and I was just at Reach speaking to the kids there this morning. How important is that to the culture of Prince Edward Island? How important is their funding to get people and help people on the right track?
Well, I mean, the work that Adventure Group and EPYDC in Summerside and West has done for our clients is immeasurable, really. Because what we have is a pool of individuals who, we're able to refer to those particular resources, and they have the skill, they have an unbelievable level of skill to be able to help support us in having the client identify the wonderful opportunity that may be there for them if they're willing to engage in that skill development, getting them out of their home, getting them more immersed into the community, seeing the potential and the opportunities. We administer a program, and those folks are, really sort of that peripheral support to us and the client, that really it's kind of where almost like where the magic is really going to happen. And I'm sure for anybody who is, and Roxanne could speak to this better than anyone, if you've ever gone to any of the ceremonies or graduation ceremonies that our clients have, they've gone through a skills development program or a life enhancement type of a program, I can't describe to you what it means for those folks and the emotion that's involved with that and the impact it has in their lives. You have to see it to really appreciate it. So to think that, at some point in time, everything evolves, but I truly believe, and those programs evolve with the needs based on, what the market needs and what the trends are and so on, and we understand that as well. So it's a wonderful relationship that we have, and it works very, very well.
Yeah.
And I certainly would never want to think that those opportunities would no longer be there for our clients. I can't imagine what that would mean, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
And just to build on what Pat said, I think, when we look at reducing poverty for Islanders, it really isn't something we can do alone. So our community partners,
Right.
our NGOs, are really critical. And we've actually, over the last couple of years, put community connector positions in place as well for that sole purpose of linking people to, if there's services, beyond the scope of our program, that they can try to find them in the community with a partner, an NGO, even somebody who lives within their community who could help them with transportation. So we've put those in place to even strengthen that connection that we have.
Thank you, and I just again want to highlight that Roxanne Carter-Thompson is here with us today in the gallery, which is wonderful, from the Adventure Group, and thank you for clarifying and sharing the value of those programs. Thank you. Gord.
And the reason why I ask that is because we're here as a committee to look seriously at a basic income guarantee, and a basic income guarantee means some pretty prolific changes financially for our government moving forward. And that money has to come from somewhere, whether it's a pilot or an experiment program. That's why I asked how important it is. There's only so much financial need to go around. And I don't want to see, and we've talked about it, we don't want to see any programs get deterred in the end. And I'm just wondering in your opinion, and have you done the research, have you researched other basic income guarantees that have been around, and what are your thoughts about moving forward versus programming? Would this be a one-stop shop for clients, or would it hurt the programs along the way that we fund as well?
I think from our department, we're not looking at a basic income guarantee. We're monitoring the social assistance program. But to add to your comments, I think they're somewhat separate entities. One is a financial universal income, and the other is a working program in integrating people back into society. And I think they would continue to be separate from my point of view. But again, our department is not really looking at a basic income guarantee or universal income today. Yeah. Again, we're open to discussions and collaborate, but that's not what we're.
Yeah, no, and we're just trying to get a sense from you while you're here. You deal with poverty a lot, and that's our end goal, is to eradicate poverty in Prince Edward Island. We're trying to, while you're here with the different experts, we're trying to get as much information as we possibly can. Thank you, Chair.
Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. One of the things we talked about with the basic income guarantee is, and again, from stakeholder and stakeholder input, is about conditionality, about aligning it with an expected outcome or not. I'm hearing consistently from you and from the previous work that we've done on social assistance is that it's a pretty clear thread that one of the primary functions of the social assistance program is getting people back into the workforce. A basic income guarantee in many places where it has been discussed or piloted is not connected to the conditionality of an employment program. So there's quite a difference in terms of that, and that sort of, I guess one of the things that we've also heard is that a basic income guarantee should not replace an existing welfare program, though there may be things that eventually or very quickly become redundant or repetitive or duplicated. We don't want to remove a program that is meeting a specific need, and I think that it sounds more and more like there is a really big difference between the mandate or the purpose of social assistance in PEI here, which is this is about employability. It does also include a group of people who are not employable, which is a bit of a challenge, I think, in terms of how do you align priorities for you. And so I guess that it's to be really clear about that we're, the outcome of these sound like they're pretty different channels, but they're still going to connect in terms of who they serve. do you see this being what I'm getting at, which is probably that this is about a parallel process, not a replacing process or a if this then that, because the mandates are so different, or potentially so different.
And again, maybe just to reiterate a little bit from our department, we're not looking at a universal income program. We are, monitoring the social assistance program. We all hear and understand what universal income or basic income guarantees do, but I think the committee is obviously looking at that, as you addressed at the beginning, Chair. But from our point of view, we're really just looking at social assistance. Again, we're open to discussions and talk about the different approaches, but I think from us through here today, it's just really on social assistance.
Hannah?
You started that separation of clients who can work and clients who cannot in one way or another with the accessibility supports program. And I know within the legislation you talk there about sort of emergency need, short-term need and long-term need, and often disability clients are going to fit into that long-term need bucket. Is there a future space for social assistance where there is a real separation between a delivery path that's for employability and that employability piece is less of a pressure or is taken off the table for those who are in accessibility? Because I see an alignment for those who are unable to work as being better aligned with the basic income, frankly, than with social assistance.
I mean, I think some of that work will become clearer as we go through the work that we're doing around employment. I'm not sure if we have that answer today. Certainly we know there's a number of people under accessibility support who can't work. There's a number of people that can work, maybe it's full-time, maybe it's part-time as well, even within accessibility supports. So I think as we go down this road over the next year a little bit more, we'll be able to answer that better.
Okay, I appreciate that. One more, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that you're also saying that this is obviously not something that is, pretty clear that this is not part of your capacity and so on. And we have talked in here about the need for there being even a third party to be involved in it for that arm's length management if and when we get to that stage. But one of the factors that we do need to discuss is the capacity to liaise with the federal government, because that relationship would be necessary for unreserved Indigenous Islanders. And in terms of inclusivity, that's a critical piece of our mandate as well. Do you have any current role in that, or can you just give us some information on how that's currently managed? Because obviously we have social assistance for provincial, which includes off-reserve, but the on-reserve happens in a separate space, and some clarity would be really helpful.
So just to be clear in your question, as far as the responsibility of delivering of social service support programs? Yes,
because we know that that liaison is going to have to happen should we roll out any form of pilot. We need to obviously liaise with your department in some aspect, though not likely to deliver, but we also need to liaise with whoever it is that is managing that relationship.
Sure.
Where does that happen?
Well, and I have fairly regular contact with representatives from Scotchford and from Lennox as well. I provide information to them with respect to provincial program enhancements. We obviously keep close connections because of the similarity of the work that we do. They clearly have a separate sort of responsibility path than we do. As far as the conjoining of those responsibilities at some point, I don't know what that may be or when that may be, but just to sufficely say that I've worked very closely with many representatives through MCPEI and did sit at that table for 6 years and working at sort of a collaborative model, provincial and through I'm not sure they're still referred to as INAC or not, but so it was mediated through MCPEI, so representatives from all bands were at that table, and my role at that time was to provide them with information with respect to our social programs.
Okay.
Because they were very much looking to try to be on the same path and looking at the financial supports. And how the province delivered services and so on. So although I'm not at that table in a formal capacity any longer, I still have the conversations with those folks who deliver the services.
Okay. Yeah. That's really helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Sunny.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I'd also like to just kind of add, we talked about the holistic approach and how yourselves and groups like Roxanne Carter-Thompson's Adventure Group work together to enhance individuals' social skills. It's not all money that helps people that are vulnerable, which is great to hear. I just have one question or one comment. As part of the press release that went out in December, it said, as part of this investment, the provincial government will also be transitioning to a single living allowance for social assistance clients in order to remove red tape. Could you just elaborate on that? Like, what does the red tape mean? Is that a measurable thing that you're not going to have anymore? Or was it a measurable thing? Or can you just give a little info on that, please?
So I think the red tape, so currently if you look at the 4 different items, that will be moving to a single rate. So it's food, clothing, personal and household items. So right now, each of those, although clients get that as a lump sum, they don't currently get, but there is in our rate structure, those are defined individual rates. Like, 300 for this, 50 for this, that type of thing. So in terms of making, any changes, because the food rate increase was also to help just support people generally. So to do that, it's challenging for us to increase any rates or move that when we have it across a bunch of different rates, even though clients are actually receiving one together. And the reason why the rates were separated individually was a lot for helping clients with their budgeting. So although they could spend it as they liked, it was a support to people in terms of it would be helpful in your budgeting if you spent a certain amount on this. So the red tape would be for clients, but also for us as well from an administrative perspective. It would help to reduce that.
Thank you.
Does that help answer?
Did you have any further questions? Gord?
The comfort allowance, I'm not sure if the comfort allowance, like for residents at PE home, would that be under your department?
No, that's long-term care.
Okay.
That's under health.
Exactly. Okay. That's the question I had, so that's fine. Yeah, I'm gonna ask them.
All right. Does anybody else have any further questions? Anna, yes.
Thank you. It's just a follow-up on the allocation of funds with the allocation of funds in various support programs. Again, one of the things around basic income guarantee is about the lack of conditionality, which I know is probably one of the biggest challenges we face when we talk about it with other people who maybe haven't experienced it or they see the risk in that, and there absolutely is a risk in giving people money with no conditions. But there's also the risk of giving people money in buckets and saying you can only spend it on this. You had mentioned earlier about pharmacare and about dental support for social assistance. There's 2 questions, Chair. One of them is the funding for the support for those programs, does that come out of the social assistance department budget or is it budgeted separately?
The dental
Yeah.
does. The prescription, the medication part is attached to pharmacare, which is attached to health.
Okay,
Anna?
thank you. So it's a clarification about the dental piece. And again, this is an area that we have spoken about before in the House, and I think it's something to be clear on. The current provision for dental care is for emergency service dental care only. It is for in the event of there being an emergency need for pain or infection. It does not include restorative or preventative. So basically, it doesn't include fillings or cleanings or any of those things. It basically says that if you get to the stage that you need emergency care, you can have your teeth removed.
We do fillings. We do
Okay.
fillings. And we do some restorative work, and because we're not dental experts.
No.
So we contract with the Dental Association, and there's a number of procedural codes that are discussed and determined as a basic support, and I'm suggesting that's really what it is a basic support, dental support. And then we consult with, in situations where it may be more complex, and the need may be greater than what the policy is there to sort of support the day-to-day decision-making, we consult with the provincial dental consultant, Dr. Alberta Bangbo. So anything that we have with regards to concern or complexity that's presented to us, and we very much rely on individual dentists to present that information back to us with regards to their patient and what their request may be. We present it to Dr. Adebangbo, and then he provides us with a consultation as to whether we should consider it, should we support it, and so on.
Anna?
Thank you, Chair. So perhaps this is a conversation for another time, but it would be very useful, I think, for a couple of things for the committee and for yourself. One of them is that policy doesn't reflect that in terms of how it's written and unfortunately how sometimes it's implemented. You know, that part of conditionality is the interpretation and application of policies by individuals in departments. And so, you know, we do have a number of examples where that has not been the experience. So it would be really good to sort of have the opportunity to think about that in terms of how we can reflect that from an administrative perspective and the experience of the client. From the perspective of this committee, Chair, I think it's important that we consider all those additional pieces which are factors that impact the services that are being provided. So the costs reflected in free pharmacare or in improvements of dental care, as well as food, clothing, household and so on, when we are costing the impact, but also the potential savings that may occur from reallocation of funds from one section to another. We may be pleasantly surprised, I hope, in that in some cases it is a matter of one bucket moving from one place to another place. But those are some of the hidden costs sometimes in program delivery that can really make a difference in terms of efficacy of delivery and so on. So it would be great, Chair, if we can kind of clarify some of those numbers when we do our costings with the department to sort of be sure that we have, the snow just fell off the roof, sorry. Hope nobody's standing under that. If we can get some accurate numbers of those additional investments that are being made through the department and how we need to reflect those in our finances. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, and that's a very good point, and I'm glad to hear that you're open to consulting with us throughout this process, because we will need to check in with you on these pieces, most certainly. Ernie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And again, it's more of an observation. And when Sunny had asked a question with regard to liquid assets and the 2,500 and the like, it's something I don't think that we have heard, though, from presenters in the past. Certainly, we're looking at a pilot, basic income guarantee pilot, potentially, but it being unconditional. But have we ever, and it's something I think that we do have to take into consideration as we move forward, is liquid assets. And does that, or does it not have any impact on a basic income guarantee? And I guess what I'm thinking of there is an individual or family situation that through whatever means, inheritance, what have you, but that although their income level is low, but that their liquid assets are very high. So is that something that in our recommendations, in our considerations, that we need to take into account? And like I say, that's just an observation to have it on the record that as we go forward, that we do need to look at that. So, and just again, thank you to the staff members for your presentation today. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. It's definitely a consideration we will have to look at. I know that there has been a considerable amount of research that has looked at this issue around the impact of sort of keeping people in poverty when we force them to liquidate assets to a certain level, which is why that amount was increased, but it is a conversation we will have to have for sure. So thank you for adding that to the record. All right, any other questions? Okay, so as I mentioned, we are, I would like to sort of hopefully wrap up by noon. So normally I would break now, but I'm just going to test the room to see if we have anybody who would like to bring forward new business at this time. And if we do, then we'll break and come back and have that discussion. Okay, great. Thank you. So our next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, February 18th at 1:30, and we will have the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction back. So that's wonderful. They're accommodating us after we had some technical difficulties. So I'm glad we will be able to hear from them. And we have various community groups set up for February 26th, and the Department of Finance coming in March 4th. So we do have things moving along, and we're sticking to the timelines that we agreed to. All right. Oh, Emily, did you?
Sorry, I was just going to say for clarity for the committee, those notices haven't gone out yet, but they will go out today and they'll be confirmed group-wise appointment sent out and everything like that. So you'll see that in your email this afternoon.
Sneak preview of what you'll get later today. All right. Any other questions or comments before we adjourn the meeting? I want to thank you all again so much for being here. It was incredibly helpful, and I really look forward to working with you as we work through the next steps toward our recommendations from this committee. All right. Motion to adjourn, anyone? All right, Annabelle, we are adjourned.